Welcome to ALAQA, a podcast about the relationships shaping systems, capital, and the climate transition. This special playlist is developed in partnership with Change Now. It brings together conversations with fund managers who presented on stage during Friends for Change, and with investors, operators, and thinkers navigating the tensions of impact, climate, and finance. Today, I'm joined by Ebru Kaya and André Stürmer, co-founders and stewards of Atreyu and RIA. Previously, Ebru was the CEO of The Hatchery, an impact fund focused on food. Amongst others, Ebru led the sustainability agenda in Central Africa for Unilever and in South Africa for RCL Foods. As for André, he has been supporting young businesses in South Africa since 2009 in his capacity as a coach to management, as chairman, as fundraiser, and as an investor, both on his own account and as MD of TriVest, a German-owned VC based in South Africa. Before that, he was an investment banker in London and Johannesburg with JP Morgan. The two main topics that stuck with me after this episode, which was a fairly long and fairly personal and unique one, was first the choice that Ebru and André made to go deep before going big, or maybe choosing to not go big at all when it comes to regeneration and regenerative investing. And the second is that unlearning and experimenting new ways of investing can only take place if practice is embedded as part of learning itself. Hello, Ebru. Hello, André. Welcome.
Hello, Iman.
Hello, Iman.
Thank you for having us.
Lovely to see you.
Thank you. We were just having a conversation before pushing the play button on a question of time and the relationship to time in different cultures, and why slowing down or considering what time means in our projection to the future and to our role in that future can be a source of very interesting reflections. Probably our listeners will find us particularly chill and relaxed, etc. It's because we already had a cute, not philosophical, but deep conversation right up. So I like the fact that we already warmed ourselves up without even thinking about it. And it's funny because I usually start this way, like saying what happened just before. And there is sometimes an expectation to behave a certain way when you do these recordings. And I would like to reinforce the fact that we are having a relationship before. We will be having the same relationship that we'll keep living during the recording, and the relationship will go on after. So it's just a glimpse for others to listen to us having this relationship. But let's not pretend like we're just meeting or something. And I hope that you will enjoy this moment as much as I will.
That's lovely, man. We're looking forward to it. Yeah.
Thank you. As you know, ALAQA means relationship in Arabic, and the first thing to start a relationship is to know who is in the room with you. Would you mind starting with a few words? So either each of you or together, it's really up to you, to tell us a few words about your story and what brought you to the work that you're doing today together, Ebru and André.
So I'm going to do this a little bit differently and take your cue, Iman, about this idea of being true to ourselves and in any environment. I was having a chat with our boys, the 11-year-old twin boys that I live with here in Johannesburg, about what is more important in life, the what you do or the how you do it.
You start strong, André.
He never fails.
I'm going to talk a bit about the how as well, because our journey, Ebru and my journey, has been similar in the sense that we were in big corporate environments, or in my case it was in banking for many years of our career, especially in the early years of our career. I was in investment banking, and it's a very extractive industry. And what that typically then also calls for is, and this talks to a lot of what we see today in the world with fragmentation of society or community, and people feeling run down, feeling like they're not doing what they wanted to be doing in life. It talks a lot to that, because in the traditional system that most of us or all of us grew up in, we get taught good skills perhaps, but we also get taught to do things against our instincts, because there's assumed to be a way of doing things which mainly talks to maximizing profits. And I'm talking now in the business context, and everything else either doesn't matter or is less important. And so I do remember many times in my journey, let's call it the first 20 years of my career, how I was doing things as an investor or as an intermediary in the investment space with JP Morgan that I just did because it was what I was taught to do. And it made sense in the bigger scheme of things. It made sense even in my economics degree in Germany at a libertarian university, where we were told the free market solves everything. I believed it, right? And a lot of my premises as I developed my own life, not just the business part of it, I would apply that logic and think about what's the IRR here. I didn't probably take it to quite that extent, but I know people do. People go to MBA reunions thinking about what's the IRR for me. Should I go? Should I fly there? Should I not? And I think it's not a very fulfilling way of living life. And we, both Ebru and I in our journeys, realized that time and time again that we were being asked to do things that weren't congruent with our essence and with what we felt called to do. And so we obviously knocked our head against the system many times until we both decided about 8 years ago to say, we're going to do this in a very different way. We want to be true to ourselves. We want to know who we are, and we want to be true to that. And that talks actually more to the how than the what. So we can explain the what maybe a little bit later, because I don't want to take too much time up now about what we do. But I think it's actually very important. I'm hoping it resonates with you based on your introduction, that the how is actually more important to us, meaning that we act with care, that we act with grace, which means, I thought about this yesterday, which means we do it that there's no harm, and we do it within the boundaries of the natural systems that we are surrounded by and that we are part of. And often we don't see ourselves as part of it.
And both of us have economics and finance backgrounds. I would like to emphasize one thing that André said, is that the way all of us, most of us in the Western civilization, is we're brought up with shoulds. This is the way the world works. This is how things happen. This is how you should do things. And André and I were no different. We were brought up with those things. This is the way things work. This is the way you make a return. This is the way you make a living. This is the way life works, people work. And when we left the system, because it did not resonate with who we are, and started defining our own path, one of the biggest things for us was actually get rid of those shoulds and everything we've been told, this is how the world works. Everything we've been told, we started challenging them in our personal lives, in our business lives, in the way that we act as investors. And that's why André is talking to the how, because what, of course, matters, but how becomes the magic. So that's all I wanted to maybe emphasize.
Thank you, Ebru. My follow-up question for both of you is, when you say we decided to be true to ourselves, or at least to start or to try to be true to ourselves, because I'm not sure the way you expressed it, André, was as definitive as what I'm saying right now. How do you manage the embedded privilege of being allowed to be true to yourself as often as possible, to challenge the principles upon which the current economic system and the way Western cultures operate, although it's not the topic of the podcast, but the whole concept of the West can be challenged. But anyway, where honestly the majority of the population on the planet, even if they are aware of impossibilities or paradoxes or things that do not make them happy or make them clearly suffer or make people around them suffer, they don't have the choice but to keep going, just either out of economic constraints or basic survival for their families, etc. So how do you manage this awareness of the fact that, yes, there are people who don't have the privilege of asking themselves the questions, but at the same time actively asking those questions? How do you manage this balance?
I think there is privilege. We need to accept that. This part of it was privilege. It's an interesting one, because I was the first jumping off the current system into trying to build something new. And it was a challenge for me, but a different type of challenge. Challenge in the sense that I was always brought up to be super independent and had to look after myself. And I always made sure that I have a stable income coming in, never ask anyone for anything. So that was my bringing up. So when I stepped out, there's a massive fear in the sense that oh my God, what happens if I can't make this work? Yes, I was very lucky to have a husband who could support me, but still, I think the emotional challenge was quite big. I do not want to underestimate the fear that comes with stepping out of the system, especially when you're living, what do you call it, mouth to mouth, like at a very minimal level in terms of income. But there are still many of us, I think, have somehow bought into this concept of we've got to keep up. The current system that we're in lures us into buying stuff. So we end up having these big houses, we end up having cars, we end up sending our children to private schools because these are the things that we have to do. That becomes the norm. And we never really challenge, do we really need such a big house? Do we really need that fancy car? Do we really need our kids to go to these amazing private schools? And are there any other ways? Do I really need a big wardrobe? I think one thing that has shifted a lot, certainly for me, was to reevaluate value in my life. And I very quickly realized that actually I needed very little stuff. All that stuff that I thought I needed, I didn't need them. I didn't need big stuff. So I suddenly realized that I was able to make do with, I don't know, a way smaller portion of my corporate income, let's put it that way. Very happily, very happily. So I think that's the one thing that I'd like to probably invite everyone to reflect on. What is real value in our lives? Because when we say value, we normally attach the financial value, but value comes in many other forms. The second I let go of the financial value that comes with the corporate sector and opened up for a different definition of value, it was amazing how my life was filled up with abundance. Abundance of community, abundance of time, abundance of enjoying what I'm building. And these are all value, abundance of being able to spend time with my children, abundance of health. These are all very valuable, but we don't, when we talk about value, we only attach it to the financial piece. And so it was a bit of readjusting in terms of what is really important in our lives. And do I really need to eat in a fancy restaurant, or I'm okay to have a simple meal at home with my family? And for me, a simple meal at home with my family was way more fulfilling than a fancy meal outside. I'm not talking about when your income is really tight and you're at a survival point. That's more tricky, I understand that. But I want to offer one more challenge, is that I actually do truly believe that when André and I invested quite a lot of our savings into Atreyu, into our fund, and we often joke and we say, we invested that because we truly believe in what we're doing. But we often joke, if things go wrong, we go and live as monks. You can live as monks, and it's okay. That's okay, you live, and you probably live a happy life. How much we need to live is a big question. How much is enough?
We say this to our children, that they are growing up in a privileged environment. If you think about South Africa especially, which has got the highest Gini coefficient in the world, how important it is that it gives us a responsibility for others, okay? And I can say, and I have never reflected on this until today, so thank you, Iman. That's actually quite a powerful realization, because it applies to what we do as well. I'm not sure that we equated it consciously to this, but Ebru and I, for many years, Ebru since the age of 18, and for me maybe a little bit later, but even when I left investment banking, we've lived with that notion of giving back. And that is based, we can, right? We have been privileged. We've been to great schools, universities. We've grown up resourced with children's books at the age of 2, etc., etc. Today, what we are doing with Atreyu and our Regenerative Investing Academy, RIA, it is in service of a more equitable, inclusive, aligned to natural boundaries way of doing things, which should ultimately, it's a Horizon 3 endeavor, right? So it's going to hopefully have effects in 10, 20, 30 years' time, to the extent that we all have a more equal society, right? And I see that as a direct link to the fact that I can, right? I have the privilege and we can do this.
Thank you, André. So you offer me a very nice segue into my next question, which is, would you like to tell us a bit more about what you do? We spoke about the how briefly. I think we'll go back to the how, but the what and with whom?
Ebru and I met about 8 years ago, and we were on the same journey of wanting to step away from the system and think about what else is there. And we both were very familiar with investing experience, and both had backgrounds in finance and that. And so we started an investing fund called Atreyu. Atreyu is the good guy from The Never Ending Story. Some of your listeners will know the children's book, where we set out, based in Johannesburg, with an initial view on Africa businesses, or businesses in the global north, which is a terrible term, that we're adding services to, again, another terrible word, emerging markets. And we started on that journey, and we still had a conventional mindset that we applied, but we wanted to apply a different mindset. And we didn't know yet exactly what that would look like, okay? But I think it's important to say here, we just went out and did it. We just started. We didn't sit and contemplate and try and write theories of change. We just went and did it. And why that was helpful is because we, as I said to you, we wanted to be true to ourselves. And how did we know when we weren't? Is when it didn't feel right. Okay, so when we were doing things, investing, right, and we felt, actually, you know what, we didn't really enjoy that process, or look at what this has resulted in. That's not the consequence we were intending to trigger. We would find a different way. And those times, Ebru was studying biomimicry. She was studying regenerative leadership with Laura Storm. Then she came across John Fullerton's regenerative economics. And then we came across Fritjof Capra's complexity science views. And then we came across the Regenesis Institute, which is one of the leaders globally on regenerative practices in the development space. And in those times, we were loving that language, and we were loving the concept of living system principles and being a participant of nature rather than an actor on. And we defined a way, an approach, which we call the regenerative investing approach. And that's what we apply at Atreyu. We've raised €1 million. We had people that were in our networks who loved what we were doing and saying they wanted to support that endeavor of defining a new way of, a new paradigm to investing. So we raised about €1 million, and we've deployed that into 7 companies across the world, but mainly in Europe. And then we realized, look, it's fine for us to have that different approach, but it's not going to be terribly meaningful if it's just Ebru and myself who hold that approach, right? Because the investees or the founders of the business we invested into don't need to take it just because we've taken it. And the investors who made that financial capital available to us also didn't need to change their mindset if they didn't want to. And we didn't want to rest with that. And so we almost stumbled across a business opportunity, not even opportunity, creating an academy, which we call the Regenerative Investing Academy, which is less of an academy and more of a learning ecosystem, where we offer programs and invite participants in to explore what regenerative principles mean to them in their practice as it relates to investing, and investing from a broad perspective. So today we've got Atreyu and Ria, the academy, and we call them the yin and the yang. They really feed off each other. At Atreyu, we bring it into practice and we learn. We feed that into our ecosystem, where we have, in the meantime, a couple of hundred people that have been on this journey with us, and we learn together, right? So that's today basically the what.
Talking about the how, you said, oh, we found an opportunity, and then you said, no, it's not an opportunity. Let me rephrase. I don't know all the nuances of the word opportunity in English, because I wasn't born an English speaker. Okay, it's my professional language, but it's not my mother tongue. So I'm sure I'm missing some things. However, in French, opportunité is not necessarily related to business or to making a grab, making quick money at all. And it comes from the word in Latin, opportunitas, which means something that comes at the right time, at the relevant time. There's a notion of kairos, if we are talking Greek. Okay, it comes at the right moment, as in you're doing the right thing. So it's just to bring to your attention the fact that, again, from one person to the other who may have different cultural background, the word opportunity doesn't mean the same thing. It's just to release a bit of the pressure of the word, which is not as salesy, at least in my ears.
I'll let Ebru talk a bit about the how around that formed, okay? But it's very interesting, Amen, because the way that I used the word opportunity is exactly in the sense that you offered it now. But as I articulated it, I was like, some people might think that, oh, we jumped at an opportunity to make money or something. And that's why I was, that wasn't it. So that's why I course corrected. But I'll let Ebru fill in on that, because it is a very important point in our journey and in the way we do things, as in the how.
So the opportunity, the beautiful RIA, actually came about when we were contemplating our journey with Atreyu. As André mentioned, we started Atreyu 6-7 years ago with the intention of investing differently, which then became a practice of investing regeneratively or bringing regenerative practice into our work. Okay, so, and then the constant learning with that. And when we deployed our 1 million, which is the amount that we've raised, we were at a contemplation point around what to do next. And in the conventional sense, we had a couple of opportunities to partner with funds in Europe and go maybe raise 50 million, 100 million and bring regeneration into Europe. And sounds all very exciting, right? And when André and I sat down and we both looked at each other, we're like, that's not what we want to do. We don't want to go 50 million, 100 million. We don't want to go big regeneration because we knew it was going to be very difficult for us to stay true to the practice if we went that big, at least at this early stage of regenerative practice.
Ebru, I'm sorry, would you mind, because at this point, I'm sure our listeners may wonder what is so special in regenerative investing, the way you practice it, that you would decide as two individuals who know what needs to be done in your view to step away from having a wider impact, if we speak with these terms. So would you like to share just one reason, one specific example of your practice that, if taken at a bigger scale, would pollute or take you off track from what you're trying to do? Would you like to share this with us?
Sure. I think the simplest answer is that regenerative practice is still at the early stages of it. We're all learning. And it's not one practice that you can say, this is it, and you're going to copy and paste it, and it's going to work everywhere. So number one, the whole point of regeneration is got the word evolution in it and developmental work in it. One of the reasons why we set up RIA, and we say it, we needed a community to learn with, but we actually wanted to grow ourselves as well, because it requires conscious development of the individual who is practicing it. So it is a new practice. It is one that needs to evolve, and we honestly think that in the regenerative practice, we will all call ourselves practitioners rather than experts. So that was the one reason, because we knew that we were still growing and learning. And then the second thing is, when you got something so special that you are nurturing, and it's got a true essence, you don't want to dilute that, and you want to take care of it and make sure that it grows beautifully. Imagine, like, we were at that stage, we were like a little seedling. It is too early to take it and put it into the wild forest and defend itself. We didn't want to rush it. And we're very conscious that Atreyu, when we set it up, we didn't know the term at that time, but we set it up as a steward-owned company. It's a evergreen investment holding company. It's totally long-term. And because we didn't want to have the pressure of exiting any business at any stage, we wanted to hand them over when they were right. Again, with the child analogy, we always say that we invest into toddlers, earlier stage businesses. And when they become teenagers, we make sure that they're ready to go into the world, and then we can exit them. We don't want to send them off if they're not ready. That's kind of the care we bring in. So that's why we had that long-term structure. And then the other big one that we have is that steward-owned structure that we have at Atreyu, that André and I make all the investment decisions. We do not get, as the stewards of the company, we are not influenced by the investors and wanting to take it to a different destination. And when we were to partner and go at a very big numbers, around 50 million, 100 million euros, we didn't think that the world was ready to give us 50 million and then be comfortable with a steward-owned or steward-guided structure. So the money was going to come and dictate what we wanted to do, and we didn't want that. We were not ready for that. And then the third one, which is, I think, probably as important, if not more important, we have learned in our journey. Remember, I was at the beginning, I was saying, we're all told these things, that the world works in this way. The scale, your impact works with growing, right? You think that you're going to have a bigger impact by 50 million, 100 million fund. We realized that no, you can have a bigger impact by being small, but the truest integrity we can really bring the regenerative practice to life in the places that we invest and the way that we carry ourselves. And by just going even deeper in our practice, because then we would be uniquely us and we wouldn't be competing with anyone, and we could be potentially an example for others to explore a different way. So our definition of impact has changed drastically in terms of scale, going wide versus going deep. Where we chose to be small and truest integrity rather than big but diluted. Because the second you're diluted, you're just another fund.
I wanted to show a book that I'm reading now.
Beautiful.
Small is Beautiful by Schumacher. That's an important book talking about the beauty of staying small and true to yourself.
But coming back to the journey then, Iman, it was interesting because people often ask us, what is, with Atreyu, we've got three things. One is that we were long-term. Two is that we're steward-owned. We're guided by the stewards. And three, we have quite a wide mandate. Okay, we invest into healthy planet, healthy people, because one without the other doesn't exist. And empowered communities is what brings them together in a way. And without empowered communities, they don't exist. So there's this huge interconnection between them. But a traditional investor would say, this is such a wide mandate, you need to focus on a certain sector. And we say our answer to that is that our point is not necessarily to transform a certain sector. Our point is actually to showcase a different way of investing is possible. And so when it comes to going big, when we decided, no, we don't want to go big, we actually want to go deep. And we brought RIA. RIA came alive with total serendipity. We said, how can we have more integrity in our work? Meant that firstly, we need to invite our investee companies and our investors closer to us in the journey. And second, we need to have a community that we can grow with and develop our capacities to become really, to invest regeneratively. And that meant a gathering in Barcelona, and really RIA was oportunidad. It just was birthed there. It was just the most beautiful experience. But what is interesting is that with RIA, we started building a community where we are learning together. Yes, we have programs, but RIA now brings us investors. We're not going and actively looking for investors, but when people hear about RIA and they experience our approach, they say, we want to be part of this journey. We're not actively going and looking for raising funds and becoming big or anything like that. But because of the path that we chose and because we are trying to be the highest integrity possible, we actually attract people, attract investors rather than chasing investors, saying, come and join us.
Okay, I have two questions for you. One, the thesis of this podcast is that relationships can be an infrastructure for change. That's the thesis. Okay. Can you describe, because obviously it resonates when you say, hey, we had RIA and then there's this community and then everybody started to perhaps question what they believe, how they operate, how they invest, and then they say, hey, have me join, let me join whatever you're doing at Atreyu. How do you convey this notion of going beyond the self-centered approach to learning, which I've been in this space of impact at large since 2012, so 14 years. I've seen many times communities online, offline, of people who keep on learning and learning, but not doing much out of this learning, right? And I was myself in that situation for quite some time on certain topics, obviously. So I'm not saying that it's good or bad. I'm just saying learning doesn't necessarily take you to action or to experimentation. So how do you encourage or how do you show to your community members at RIA that it goes beyond themselves as recipients of this knowledge? So that's my first question. And my second question, how do you navigate the tension between the internal work that you seem to be focusing on, both of you, and together. The internal work, you said at some point, it didn't feel right. Integrity, high integrity, so there's something about self-reflection and contemplation. You use that word. But at the same time, investment is an activity which is profoundly oriented towards the outside. It's an outward activity. So towards another group of people, another system, another chain of relationships, which can be affected, which can depend on that investment activity. So how do you negotiate and navigate this tension of what is right, what feels good, how do you define high integrity within yourselves, but at the same time, not imposing, not coming from a high moral ground? The entrepreneurs or the business leaders or the business owners that welcome you in their business through your investment.
I'm happy to answer the first question, although I think the second also, they flowed into each other. This idea about the community and what is different about learning together is important, because the conditions we create in RIA, in the programs or the sessions or interventions, we sometimes work with a family office directly, but generally our programs have 25 people in them because we like to keep them small and intimate, and you'll hear now why. Is what we have found when we ask our participants during or after the 12-week program what was most valuable to them. Almost always the most important feature is the community, and the community being that energy field that gets created between the people participating. And I think the reason why that is because we intentionally don't, remember even right at the beginning when I said academy, I said we're not really an academy, we're a learning ecosystem. And by the way, we did investigate the source of the word academy, which is quite interesting, but people can go and check that out online. But we, just so that I don't expand on that as well.
What a teasing!
Like it. The thing is, amen, that they say community, the community they created has been amazing, okay? And why is that? It's because we are not learning together, we are growing together. We make a very important point that we are not here as experts. We, in fact, start our sessions by saying, do not take anything we say here as the truth, but don't discard anything we say here as being wrong without trying it yourself. Because essence is a very important concept in regenerative design. What is your essence? And everyone's essence is different. So everything is different concepts and different approaches will feel different to everyone. And so people need to go on their own journey. And when we have people that are very experienced in this field, we don't present them as experts. We present them as participants and maybe experienced practitioners. Yeah. And so people feel that they are also participants in something which we call an energy field or a being body that gets created, and people thrive on that and they grow with that. I think that's a very important distinction to what we do in our programs and how our community then feels as part of that community. And I would like to just bring in another component to this, which talks to a question you asked earlier on about who we do this with.
Yes.
You know, in the early stage, we're like, who do we partner with and who would make sense? We applied our logic to, as Ebru said earlier, like, let's go to partner with a big fund and bring our regenerative approach and sprinkle it into. But that didn't even feel right for the reasons Ebru explained, that we actually are nurturing something that we weren't ready to dilute. And what has happened by being true to ourselves and by putting the best versions of ourselves into, I sometimes say the universe, and some people think it's maybe a bit esoteric, but into the places that we work in, okay, we find that if that's all we do, we get so much back. I mean, it's amazing. The reciprocation that if one lives within the living system principles is, you can see it. You read it on a piece of paper when you take a course. Reciprocity is key to the system. You're like, okay, like what does it mean? But we do experience it. And that's why we have had the impact we've had. It's because we haven't asked or tried to force a certain outcome. Yeah. And in that process, we've attracted partners like, for example, the Regenesis Institute in the US in Santa Fe, who've been on this journey for 30 years, not necessarily in the financing space, but they've now chosen to work with us, and we've chosen to work with them on applying their methodologies and their learnings into the investing space or the financial space. So they've become an important partner. And others have added into our programs without asking for any compensation until we actually could afford it. financially, because they felt called to add into this field that we are building. And so the who has been really very generative relationships that have occurred through us just going our path. And for example, a family office that feels called to partner with us and to take our approach and apply it into their own ecosystem, or kind of seed it into their own ecosystem. They are partners of ours, right? We are on a journey with them, but they came because they felt called to. They didn't come because we did a study and did a pros and cons and a matrix to say which one will yield the most return, or et cetera, et cetera.
Actually, one of our investors asked this question to us. He said, but guys, you're going the wrong way around. You should have done RIA first and then do Atreyu. This is the conventional way, right? And you learn your subject and then you go put it into practice.
I'm not sure, Ebru, because the conventional way is you experience a problem and you try to find a solution for it. And that's exactly what you did.
Maybe.
I'm not sure.
We actually, funny enough, because we said to him, we don't agree. Because to be honest, for us, what makes RIA really unique is actually Atreyu. Because number one, we don't preach a theory anyway.
Exactly.
But regardless, whatever we brought forward with Atreyu, we actually experienced it ourselves. But whatever we bring forward with RIA, we actually experience ourselves in Atreyu. So a lot of what comes there comes through Atreyu experience as well as regeneration experience. So it doesn't come from a place where this is the theory, this is perfect, let's all learn together, and then let's see what happens. It's not that. It really is about getting your hands dirty. And a lot of the way that our program, again, is designed is about the participants challenging the way that they see their practice and bringing in different angles in terms of how they could invest, how they could relate to their investees, and what does even investing mean? How do you navigate that? Interesting enough, we bring that into the program. So people actually sit with that tension. Because that tension is also where we grow. One of the things that certainly we've learned with the regenerative practice is the law of three, but I think it's very common in Eastern philosophy. Like in a magnet, there's always a positive and a negative charge in everything that happens in life, right? Always. And the idea is that when there's a tension, how do you find a reconciling? It's not a compromise, but a way that you can evolve so that you can actually accommodate both sides. And that's something that we practice actually in our program. And so a lot of what we do is about practice as opposed to just learning 5 steps of regenerative investing. There's nothing like that. So that's, I think, very important. And then the second part, again, in terms of how do you engage the tensions, what we have learned so far is the biggest piece of the work is how we show up as investors. And I know, and we've questioned this. I remember having these conversations with investee companies and I go, I should be doing something else, really? Is this enough? Just the way I show up, is this enough? Or just the way I ask questions, the questions I ask or the comments that I make, is that enough? And it seems like it has a disproportional effect to the conventional way you would think, because the conventional investor would go with the control approach. There's always a power dynamic between an investor and investee in a traditional situation. And the investor dictates the way forward. And a lot of the engagements are around control, and I gave you money, you must report back what you've done with that money, right? We turn it around and we say, how can we help? How can we be there to support you to actually realize that vision that we all bought into? So it's a very different approach. It doesn't mean that we don't challenge the investee company, by the way. It doesn't mean that. We do ask tough questions. And we had many occasions of that. But asking tough questions doesn't mean that abandoning them. Asking tough questions means asking them to reflect on different things and different ways of seeing things. So regeneration means, and life means, and we know it from our children, even when they're 2 years old, they don't want to listen to us. It always puzzles me how we expect grown-up men and women to listen to us, because on the surface they might look like they listen to us, but they don't. How do we engage them in a way that we are actually partners in the journey, as opposed to us dictating a way forward?
The important point there, and we feel very strongly about this, and we make this point in our work and in our programs at RIA, is the power of not knowing. Every experience will be different. There is no right or wrong way around in what should have come first. In our case, the other way around wouldn't have worked. In our lived experience, this is what happened, and it's beautiful. To us, it's beautiful, and to our community, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
In someone else's essence and context, maybe it would have worked the other way around. Why not? Why would they not have first started an academy learning and gone like, I'm just going to go and apply this now? So it's very important that we are very adamant that there isn't a right and a wrong.
I totally agree. My point was what is very common for entrepreneurs, and I'm not talking about investors. What is very common is I happen to experience a problem or a situation.
Yeah.
And the starting point could have been, oh, we want to learn more about regeneration. And you start learning and you start finding people around you because you feel isolated. And then you build a living, learning community around it. And then you say, oh, but how do we know it really works? And that's a problem that you would experience. And then you would go and build something which would look like Atreyu. So the journey, whatever direction you want to take it. The only comment I was mentioning was it's very much around this idea, to take back to your point earlier, André and Ebru, it's to be true to what you want to do.
Exactly.
Is, are you spending your time and energy and attention to sit down with a problem that you experience and feels important enough to you to try and find a solution? That's all I'm saying. And I happen to have noticed that a lot of entrepreneurs, the social entrepreneurs one or the impact entrepreneurs, however you want to call it, it's quite common to have this type of path. But you're absolutely right. We could take another one.
Exactly.
Okay, I have 2 more sections, and honestly, there are so many things I would have wished to ask around the focus on the individual when it's our structures which are also in need of transformation. How does it not cater to an individualistic approach to business and to life? Oof, so many questions, but perhaps for another time. So 2 more sections. One, it's about contrarian thoughts. So could you please leave a statement? So something that people should do less, a hot take, or something that surprises people when you say it in a quite emotional way. So something a bit strong, a bit deep.
We don't say the saying that often, but we make this point often. It talks to what I just mentioned about the knowing and not knowing,
Yes.
which in the investing world is controversial because we are taught we must know everything and build models and they will tell us what to do and we shall decide based on X, Y, and Z and this will be the outcome. And the saying that comes to mind is a quote from Rumi, which is, beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. And it talks to this idea of we are not in control. We don't have the answers. It talks to what we spoke about before we started today's session offline, about the sense of time. We don't know if we're here tomorrow, right? We don't know what the world will look like in 10 years' time. And the more we act like we do, the more we move away from our instincts, our intuition, our better judgment, whether I should be investing another $10 million into a business that's going to make me 20, or whether I should apply that into an investment or into even a philanthropic donation that will help my immediate surroundings with more equality and a better basis for thriving for my community. And I don't know, the returns of that might not accrue to me and my bank account, but they will accrue to my children and the nature of the place that I live in.
Yeah, and Rumi, who's, for the listeners who don't know, this poet is an incredibly prolific and important figure of humanity's history, in my opinion, and in the opinion of millions and millions of people around the world. He is famous, at least in France and in the US for his small poems, let's say, but he is one of the authors and the spiritual inspirers, because he wasn't a leader, although some people would call him Maulana, our guide, our leader, for so many people through his poetry and through his unbelievably intense relationship to Shams of Tabriz, who was a force of nature and a fire by himself. So thank you, André, for bringing Rumi and Shams of Tabriz. And for those of you who are into literature, I would highly recommend Elif Shafak's book on this incredible love story, but love with not in the common sense, with two parallel stories happening or taking place in two moments in time. Thank you, André. I'm very moved.
Thank you.
Ebru, would you like to add a thought?
Yeah, mine is not going to match Rumi for sure. No.
Who can match Rumi?
I love Rumi. And I think for me, maybe it's not that conventional, but time and time again, it proves to me, at least it works for me. And slow down and stop trying to change the world and change yourself. Be the change you want to see, really. That will be mine. And that's certainly the journey that we're walking.
Thank you both. Last section. So it's a bit of a tough one, given the tone of this discussion, because we had a very expansive, articulated thought process and heart-to-heart kind of discussion. Now it's the flash round, okay? So it's big questions and short answers. So the energy is going to change.
Okay, cool.
Let's go. 1, a question you wish more investors would ask.
How are you doing today? Not how the business is. How are you doing, to the founder?
I would ask, how is your life journey connected to the journey that you're now on with the business that you are presenting?
Congruence. Interesting. Second, what did you take away from Change Now? So it can be an impression, it can be an anecdote, it can be an idea, it can be a person you met that you would like to talk again to. I don't know.
Gratitude to have met you, Amen.
Oh, yes. Likewise.
I would say spirit of the event. I thought the positivity, but I did think there was also a sense of realism. It wasn't like, woo, we're going to change the world. There was some of that energy, but there was a sense of realism that it's going to be hard work. And we have to do it together. That whole building with the open air to the sky. We are in this together. This is a collective journey. So there was this realism, but the real positive spirit that I enjoyed.
Okay. Third, what do you hope to see next year in Change Now?
So my feeling was still a lot of what I saw, and I didn't see that much because there's so much to see, is there was still a lot of, especially in the kind of the pitching environments that I was party to, I still felt a lot of mechanistic worldview was quite strongly present. And I would love to see that soften a little bit.
Less is more, I would say. Invitation to reflect, to really slow down and reflect. And spaces, more spaces to invite people to slow down and reflect together or in person. And maybe a little bit more nature. I know it's difficult being in the middle of Paris, but yeah, it just green always brings a different level of energy, right? Once you're in the Mother Nature, and it is part of us. And how do we make sure that part of us also comes into the event? When we're separate from nature, I feel like something changes in the quality of our beings and our interactions, because some critical element of ourselves is missing because the nature is not there.
I think 5 or 6 years ago, perhaps earlier, in the same venue, so Grand Palais, a very grand late 19th century building that was constructed for the World Exhibition, so something of a past colonial view as well. So
yeah.
It has a strong and not so cute history in Grand Palais, but anyway, there was a fantastic exhibition called L'Art du Jardin, so the art of the garden, which took place inside the Grand Palais. And so it is possible to bring nature within as really a philosophy of life. So very interesting exhibition. And finally, final question, what gives you hope in your space? right now? I'm not going to qualify the space you operate in. So what gives you hope?
That one is very simple. It's just the people that we interact with every day. I sometimes find it difficult to believe how we are surrounded by so many amazing people. And André and I often say that the best part of our job is the people that we work with. And it's unbelievably satisfying. And when you engage with those people, there's big hope.
I think I would say something very similar. I mean, we sometimes still think we are in a bubble, right? It's a very small part of, let's call it the business community that is engaged in this work that you put forward, Change Now put forward, we put forward. But I definitely can see that bubble is growing. And, the idea of the bubble I don't like, because a bubble would suggest it's closed, right? I do think the ripples that are being sent out, as that field grows and the ripples are amplified, that gives me hope. I do feel that is coming.
Well, thank you both. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the extra time. In all the meanings of extra, it was extra generous, extra deep, extra chill, extra honest. Yeah, and extra hopeful as well. So thank you.
Thank you, man. It was lovely being part of this.
Very nice. Always lovely to chat to you. So, like you're saying, this was not very different. Wonderful.
Thank you for listening to ALAQA. If this conversation sparked something for you, share it, leave a review, and subscribe for more dialogues at the intersection of capital, systems, and transformation.